Can you guys see me now? Hi, this is Denise. I see some of you are in the webinar, and it looks like we're starting to start. As much as I want to say that the delay was the system, it was actually user error. I apologize. I hadn't clicked all the buttons that I needed to start broadcasting, so I apologize. I am going to give it a second here to see if you're able to see me now. Make a note here. Can you see me and hear me? I hope that you're able to now. Still no. Should we reconnect? Let's see. And okay. Oh. So please click the link on YouTube. And then you should be able to see it. And hopefully you're able to see the chat and be able to join us via YouTube. The system just went through an upgrade, and in terms of how they're doing the broadcasting and doing the live stream through YouTube, which I am new at. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to see it and enjoy today's presentation. It looks like some folks have been already, and it looks like other folks are trying. So at a little bit of a late start, I'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Darilis Garcia McMillan. I want to let everybody know, as it turns out, I heard yesterday morning our presenter was not going to be able to join us today. Last month we had the same issue, but the presenter contacted me about a webinar, so I was not able to do much about it. But since I heard yesterday morning, I opted to go ahead and put a presentation together because I have gotten requests to deal with conflict and talk about conflict, and I did not want to cancel this month. So usually I'm the moderator, but today I'm going to pull double duty and be the moderator and the presenter. So I hope that's okay with everybody. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen so you won't be able to see me. And I'm just going to toggle back and forth between the screen with the chat and then my presentation. Please feel free to use the chat. Ask any questions, and I will do my best to follow along with both as I'm going through the presentation. And of course, as always, we encourage folks to utilize social media, and our hashtag is OWHE webinar. And feel free to. So I'm going to share my screen now, and we'll start the presentation. Is everybody able to see the presentation okay? Maybe if somebody is close to their keyboard can chat quickly and let me know if that's okay. And I'll go ahead and get started. So today we're going to talk about managing conflict. Some of the things that we're going to cover is what is conflict, or some of the reasons for conflict, positive aspects of conflict. Then, of course, some of the 5 styles. No presentation. I still see you. Okay, so let's see. Oh my goodness. Well, I might go through. I'm going to try one more time, and if not, I'll go through my presentation, and then what I'll do is I'm going to share it, and we'll see if I can do that here. Oops. Certainly don't feel like I'm batting 1,000 today. Through it, and I appreciate y'all being so thoughtful So I want to share my screen, and I was doing. All right. Okay, I think just for the interest of time, I started, and then I will send everybody the presentation because I am not seeing it here. Okay, maybe this might be our winner here. Work. I hope so. So let's talk about conflict. And I started talking about some of the things that we're going to talk about today. 5 styles of conflict management, conflict at work, roles and responsibilities, and then cognitive conflict. Conflict. It is a struggle for power, for property. It could be some sort of disagreement amongst people or groups. Sometimes these disagreements really result in some sort of angry argument. And it could be really about different things, ideas, feelings. So conflict can be heavy, it can feel heavy. One thing about conflict is ultimately it cannot be avoided. I think we all know that. If you have been able to avoid conflict, I congratulate you. I have not. It certainly has been some time spent in learning how to manage it. So conflict can feel like a struggle, like a tough decision, like you're going to have a showdown. You can win. However, while conflict can be tough, it's not all negative, and it doesn't have to be negative. The result, opportunity or leadership opportunity, and I'm sorry, that should say or, not of. It could be an opportunity to transform a situation into something better. It could contribute social change. And I think especially right now, as we know, after the results of the election, there's a lot of strong feelings and some people who kind of are acting out in ways that are not exactly positive. And hopefully people can channel those energies and contribute to social change. As for reconciliation of party concerns, so instead of one person winning and the other one not, bringing all those concerns together to then create an agreement that benefits both parties. And it can strengthen the intergroup relation. So there's healthy and damaging ways to manage conflicts. So if we have disagreements that are really in a supportive environment where people can come together, talk about how they feel, what they're going through, their concerns, and really aim to solve a problem together. It can bring about really an awareness of an issue that's happening at a workplace, and then it could be addressed. But we, of course, have damaging ways that people go about dealing with people, and that's name calling, personal attacks, gossiping, really lack of respect. So we want to utilize today's presentation to have tools so that we can have actual healthy conflict versus just damaging conflict. Somebody had a question about, is the presentation going to be sent out? And yes, I will be sharing the presentation with everybody. So some of the reasons for conflict. We deal with different personalities. We're not all the same. And so that can create definitely an issue for some people. We all have different sensitivities. You know, I might really care about, because I have a young daughter, but maybe not think about so much about issues for pets because I don't have a pet. So it just depends where your sensitivities lie, and that could be a result of conflict. having misunderstanding. And it says, oh, somebody put a note. We're not seeing your presentation. We see the PowerPoint screen. You see, wow. Oh, I'm sorry. Oops. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure because I'm not really able to see from my screen what you guys are seeing. But I will be sharing the PowerPoint, and I'll continue to talk about the conflict. And then from there, I will definitely be sharing this presentation with everybody today. I'm sorry, I know this is not a great solution, but I hope it's better than nothing. So we have, as I mentioned, misunderstandings. We also have a number of differences. So we have different perceptions, have a different understanding of facts. What might be fact to me, it may not be a fact to somebody else. We have different goals. We also have different methods of achieving goals. So that could be a conflict. Okay, somebody says, and can you click on begin the presentation from the beginning? I did, so that's actually what I see on my screen. So let me try this again. I'm not sure if that made a difference for folks. So I hope that it does, and I'll be sharing again the presentation soon. And we are also sometimes competing for resources, or we're competing for supremacy. We want to be number one. We want to be on top. And we also have unmet expectations. So all those different aspects of us and our needs can create conflict among people. So what I think I'm going to do is, seems like the presentation is not working out. So I'm going to just log out of it so you can see me, and I'll continue talking. Can you guys see me now? Let's see. Make sure I'm not sharing. So let's cancel. I'll continue talking about conflict, and then I will share the presentation as soon as I'm done. So we have 5 conflict management. And when it comes to conflict management, could avoid. I think we have all dealt with some folks who, when a conflict arises, their natural inclination is to avoid what's happening. And they might feel like they can't win in the situation. The stakes are too low for them to get involved. Maybe the stakes are too high, but they're not ready to deal with the situation. And or if they think if they avoid it and ignore it, it'll just go away. So there's a number of reasons why people might choose to avoid a conflict. You also have conflict can be forced because you know that you're right. So you're kind of going into it looking for the fight. It's kind of that do or die situation. This is your chance to make it happen. So you're just going to fight for it. But you can also have a style where you're just using the accommodation. So you want to be really, oh, well, I'm going to go ahead and concede because I don't really care too much. The stakes, again, are low for me. Maintain anything. So I'll just kind of let it be, let it happen. We also have collaboration, which is far more ideal, where people are really looking to themselves. And if they both can win, at least one can win. And so they decide, or maybe one idea can be pushed forward. So they work with that. And so and I know in a lot of our work areas, we want to build that collaboration and work with our team. So compromising. And compromising is where both parties are really looking to win. So maybe they'll concede a little on one in order to move something else forward and really create more of a win-win situation for folks. Compromising can be good when you have parties that are really in equal strength and kind of equal power. People who are invested in maintaining relationships and really are knowing and recognizing that if they do nothing, then there's really no resolution. So they really work together and compromise in order to build a better situation. When you're looking at conflict, either in your personal life or when you're looking at conflict within your work styles, you get different types of conflict management and what might be the ideal one for your particular situation. A lot of times we'll know that the one that's kind of the lowest, but even then, sometimes avoiding might be the right solution for the situation. You might not be able to deal with something right at that time. You might not be in the right frame of mind to deal with it. And so avoiding is looked at as a negative. It can certainly potentially work out best for the situation. So it's good to know the different type of styles and then evaluate the situation you're in to decide which style is best for you. So we have conflict at work, believe it or not. And so it really is something that we should be thinking about, preparing for, especially when we're working with peers or as a supervisor and you're thinking about your team. Recognizing the possibilities of conflict at work and how to address it is really important. So what happens when there's conflict at work? It can be as the workplace, for the environment, for the morale. It can have a lot of implications if it's not managed correctly. It can result in productivity time for employees, because if people are in conflict and they're not feeling good and they're being brought down by the situation, they're not going to be as productive, not as willing to work, really almost looking for retreats at work and trying to maybe take extra breaks. So they're just not dealing with that situation. So it could have a lot of impact employee time they're actually conducting work. Have mental health concerns. People are really stressed. They're being brought down by the situation. Conflict can really in employees in their mental well-being. It can also, I actually, a friend of mine who was telling me maybe 6 months ago that there was a conflict between employees and it actually resulted in a fight, in a physical fight. Somebody got arrested, and I just couldn't even imagine what I would do if I was in that situation. But it made me think, something that we really have to be vigilant about. And again, be proactive to manage conflict so that it doesn't end up in these type of situations. Of course, result in employees leaving if the environment at work is one that is feeling like it's conflict all the time and there's no resolution and people are not feeling good or not feeling comfortable, they could ultimately leave the company. It also result in any kind of litigation, because if, let's say, this company who had the violence, the employee who was hurt can, of course, go after damages for what happened to them at the workplace. And of course, if you have to go to court, you can have legal fees and the defense costs. So it can also have a financial impact in your workplace if it's not addressed correctly. So when we're thinking about conflict and what play in terms of that role, you can think about, how can you prevent the conflict? How can you really build a culture of working together and having positive negative. And that can also be something that you need to train for. So what type of training and professional developments are being offered to staff to try and avoid conflict? So maybe training in communication and effective communication are tools that can be used in an effort to prevent, excuse me. Supervisors should be proactive when they're responding to complaints. So a lot of times, and I've seen this myself in work environments that I've been in, both as an employee and as a supervisor, oftentimes conflict starts with a little trouble, maybe a little argument. And if it's not properly addressed, it gets bigger and bigger. And then people get more upset, more feelings are involved. And so eventually there's a bigger clash. So if we are proactive, when we hear any rumblings of conflict, that could be another way to really prevent a bigger situation. We want to make sure that we're taking reasonable steps to prevent or address the conflict. So the tools that we have with maybe HR more than likely have dealt with conflict issues with other departments. Sometimes if there's an interpersonal conflict between two employees, is there a reasonable way to accommodate them? Maybe change shifts, maybe have them in different locations. What is it, something that is going to be reasonable and not punitive? We also have to think about that, because we don't want it to feel punitive to the employees, but we want to make sure that it's addressing the situation in a way that is not creating further conflict. So what are reasonable steps that you can take in your particular situation? You want to be prompt, thorough, and effective when investigating the situation. You have other employees or people who overhear what's happening, what the conflict that's going on. We might not witness it ourselves as supervisors. And so we want to make sure that we're being prompt when dealing with that. Because if we wait too long, again, if you give it time to grow and get worse, there's a potential that that could happen. And then you have a bigger situation versus a smaller situation if you do it quickly upon people bringing it to your attention, and really doing your due diligence to investigate what is happening and address the situation. You also want to make sure that you're being positive and influential. I think for those of us who serve as supervisors, we can really lead by example and demonstrate the type of communication that we want to have with peers, and we want to make sure that we are addressing needs, but also helping people to see what is the appropriate way of doing things. But this is also, I think, important even for people who are not supervisors. Not everybody's a supervisor, certainly in our organization, and it doesn't mean that you don't have the power to influence people. So if maybe an employee comes to you and is sharing with you, or a coworker rather, excuse me, comes to you and is sharing with you a conflict situation that they're experiencing, then you can also utilize your influence and demonstrate your positive communication styles to them to help them deal with that situation and in that effort. You can influence is really important for all of us, regardless of our roles. And then you want to make sure that you're having the proper follow through. So if you are talking to some individuals, if you have done the investigation, have that check-in point, see how things are going, make sure that nobody's going back to their old ways that could contribute to conflict. So following through and making sure that things have changed, or if they haven't, what other support you can offer is really important. supervisory responsibilities when you have conflict, I think the first is to aim to address the situation with minimal corrective action. A lot of times when there's employees and in the environment and that is not doesn't feel good, the morale is down, you want to address the situation, but you don't necessarily want to start writing everybody up and all of you guys are not doing what I'm telling you to do, everybody's written up, because that could make the situation worse. So you really want to look for the minimal corrective action needed to improve the situation. I know that's something here our HR department at PCC stresses all the time, because we want to make sure that we're building, really creating an environment that feels good to employees, like they're being heard and they're being valued. So having that going into it, I think is very important. As we mentioned before, you want to be proactive. So you want to meet with the individual or the individuals who are involved in the conflict. Want to be able to give them an opportunity to share their side, understand where they're coming from, understand how they feel. And to that end, you want to make sure that you're prepared for the meeting. You want to understand the situation, what happened to the best of your understanding, and then outline the questions so that you can really get at what happened, and how can we move forward from here. You want to uphold the performance standards. I think most of our institutions probably have a statement somewhere either within the HR website or our company's website that really talks about the expectations of performance, the expectations of how you're going to communicate with other people, and how you're going to treat others. And so you want to make sure that when you're in a situation dealing with conflict and dealing with people's feelings, really, because once they have conflict, a lot of times people's feelings are involved, and so you want to make sure that you have a way to address that. You want to talk to them and direct them back to the performance standards, the expectations that the company has for behavior, and then you can have a conversation about how can we improve, maybe taking 10 minutes before you talk to somebody. And so that way it gives you a little time to cool down, to really think through what has occurred, and then have that conversation. So do an opportunity to really talk through possible ways of dealing. And you, of course, as a supervisor, you want to model that behavior. You want to model the appropriate workplace conduct, and you want to make sure that you're kind of being the pillar and the example for them, and that helps. And then you can use yourself as an example. I do that a lot when I meet with employees for a number of different reasons. I use myself as an example for things that I've done in the past that maybe didn't work out so well, so that they can see that I've been through it and what I have done in an effort to try to make the situation better. And of course, you want to follow the HR procedures as necessary. While you always want to aim for corrective action, sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes, somebody is not going to have healthy conflict, and they are going to continue either the name calling, the gossiping, the bullying, whatever kind of negative behaviors they might be exhibiting. And you talk to them and you try to offer them tools, but they don't change. So if that's the case, you're going to need to follow your HR procedures, and you want to maintain their behavior. You always document, because that's going to help you as you continue down the path of any kind of HR corrective actions. But if you don't have to get to that point, if you can get to the root of it in the beginning and really address it by talking to the individuals involved and giving them some tools, then of course that's always the preferred form of resolving conflict. But we all have to recognize that's not always necessarily the case or the best case scenario. And sometimes you do have to continue down a disciplinary path, even if you wished you didn't have to. So one way to really get at how to resolve conflict in the best way possible is to think about it in terms of cognitive conflict resolution. So cognitive conflict has 5 areas that you work through in an effort to resolve conflict. You make the approach, you share perspectives, you build understanding, you agree on solutions, and then you plan for next steps. So we'll talk about each one of those in a little more detail. So when you're thinking about making the approach, you want to do some reflection before you begin. You want to think about what happened and what kind of the outcomes of that is, how are people feeling in the office, and then from there, invite other parties to the conversation. So bring people in, maybe some of the witnesses, the people who were engaged in the conflict, so you can start having some conversations. You want to be clear about your intentions. So you can say, we had a conflict in the office and I want to come together so that we can talk about it and then we can get to a place of resolution. You want to state your goal and let them know the ultimate goal is positive resolution of the conflict. Then the next step is you share perspectives. So you ask for the individual's perspectives. What did they see? What did they feel? How did they start? How did the conflict start? And then when you hear them talking, you want to make sure that you paraphrase what they're saying to ensure understanding is happening, make sure everybody's on the same page. And then you acknowledge people's contributions. You thank them for sharing. Thank you for helping clarify. And that way they feel heard and valued. Then you want to describe your perspective. So especially for a manager, you can state what is the bigger picture of the conflict impact in the office. So if people are upset, they're in conflict, they're not feeling good, the morale is down, then our production is down, we're not serving students as we should, and that is a direct impact. So how can we really get to a resolution knowing that it has a greater impact just than what's happening with the employees? So you want to name the issue. And a lot of times I've seen in areas of conflict, I think people's feelings get hurt, their perceptions are different from each other. So they're angry, but they don't address it. And so they don't really name the issues that are happening for them and why they're upset in the first place. So you want to identify topics that the parties view as important, and then use neutral language when you're talking about them. So the next step is you want to build understanding. So now you've given them a chance to really kind of introduce what the issues were, what people's perceptions were. Now you want to discuss out of the list of perceptions, right, whatever people listed as the issues that they see. You want to discuss one issue at a time, and then you can take that time to clarify whatever assumptions people have, and then you want to explore what are the areas of interest in there, where you can maybe start drawing some connections to help address conflict and get to a resolution point. So that moves you into the next step, which is agree on solutions. So here you gotta do some questions, have the group go through some questions and really think through how you can get at a place of solution. So you wanna start with doing some reality checking. You wanna see, are the things that we're proposing as a solution, is it doable? Can we all do it? Can we all agree? That is durable. So can we do this long term and continue to work on our solutions long term? And then do an interest test. Does this meet all the parties' interests? And have that conversation. It can be time consuming, but it's worthwhile because ultimately we just talked about it's adorable. If you want to make a change that is going to last, then you need to do, sometimes you have to take the time to do that work and make sure there's something that's going to be durable and long term. And lastly, you plan for next steps. So you jointly create an action plan from the conversation that you've had, an idea and a plan for what happens next. Then who needs to do what? When does it need to be done by? Kind of gets into more of that project management outlining process. And how will the interactions take place if a problem occurs? So if we have a plan and there's a kink somewhere in there, how do we address that problem and kind of get back on track to make sure that we achieve our goals and our solutions? We want to make sure that when it comes to conflict, it's a process. And, you know, especially for those of us who serve as supervisors, seems like conflict arises in some of the most opportune times. We don't always have the time to deal with it as much as we want to. But the thing is, ultimately, as I mentioned at the beginning, conflict is going to happen. So you're going to have to make time for it. You're going to have to really work through it if you want to have a long-term solution. So keep thinking about conflict, and the presentation when I send it to you is going to have a list of references, some websites that you can visit to read more about conflict and tools for managing conflict. Through it, keep thinking about it, and just make sure that you know that you shouldn't avoid it. It's going to happen. Don't turn a blind eye to it, whether you are a coworker or whether you are a manager. Engage and try and help bring about a resolution. Likewise, in your personal lives, we are all going to see this play out in different ways and in different arenas. And so being prepared and being open to managing the conflict in the best way possible for everybody's benefit. I know that for me personally, I got to a point in my life where I didn't want to avoid anymore. Possible, I wanted to address the conflict right away. Sometimes it was really minimal misunderstandings that if I had ignored it or avoided it, it would have just potentially gotten worse because people feelings get involved. Sometimes we start blowing things up in our minds. I know I do. I'm very much a Pisces, and sometimes I create scenarios in my mind that is just like, why did I even blow something up that much? So I really am trying to make a concerted effort to address conflict right away and not let it sit, not let it fester. But certainly I am not perfect. I'm only human. And so I'm not always as good as I want to be, but certainly it's a work in progress. And so going through these conflict tools and strategies has been helpful just to get that refresher to think about it more as it comes up. Are there any questions or maybe examples that you want to share about conflict, things that you encounter that maybe you are concerned about? If you do, please feel free to use the chat function, and I am happy to engage in addressing any questions that you have. I'm so sorry that the PowerPoint didn't work so that you could follow along, but I will definitely get it out to you right away so that you're able to see it and reference it and utilize it. Definitely, I think some of the articles that I included were really helpful. So I think that especially if you're currently facing any situations that are dealing with conflict either in your personal life or at work, it could be some really good tools that you can utilize just to prepare yourself to manage it and to work with other individuals. So any other questions or any questions that anybody has around conflict or you want to discuss? We have a couple of minutes left. See, nobody's jumping in at it at the chance to share more about conflict. And that is okay. I hope that it was helpful. Again, I apologize that it wasn't, because I am not sure why I didn't share the PowerPoint. But I think it'll be helpful once I get it out to everybody, and I hope that you'll be able to use it. With that, we'll go ahead and close, and we'll get some information out for December for anybody who is interested in joining us in the December webinar. And don't forget, we have a conference coming up in January. If you haven't signed up yet, make sure that you go ahead and register. We're looking forward to seeing everybody. And with that, I want to thank you very much for your time. Thank you so much for hanging in there with all the technical difficulties. And I hope you have a wonderful week.